The dead don't have heartbeats, but the singularity caged in Rorik Mason's sternum hadn't gotten the memo. The wind, thin and sharp as shaved glass, howled across the barren moonscape, kicking up plumes of a gray, static-charged dust. He had built the grave himself, a simple cairn of rust-colored rocks piled over a scorched patch of ground. It was a lie, a monument of fiction, but it was a beacon. He'd sent out a single, encrypted ping from this location an hour ago, a ghost signal tied to his old comms ID. It was chum in the water, and he was the shark hiding just beneath the surface, waiting for the feeding frenzy. The best way to catch a hunter is to look like prey. Rorik Mason had learned that lesson the hard way, in a place that no longer existed, for men who were now nothing more than memories and red stains on alien soil. So here he was, on the storm-blasted surface of Erebus, doing his best impression of a grieving ghost. He lay in a rocky outcrop 100 meters away, the stock of his stolen plasma rifle cold against his cheek. His heart, or what was left of it, hammered a frantic, irregular rhythm against his ribs. He called it the ticker. A snarled web of black alloy and pulsing blue conduits fused directly into his sternum, a parting gift from his Groll hosts. It was a miniature, perpetually unstable singularity, and right now it felt like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage of bone. Paranoia was its fuel, and he had plenty to spare. He scanned the horizon, his cybernetically enhanced eye overlaying the desolate view with thermal signatures and motion tracking grids. Nothing. Just wind and rock and the suffocating silence of a dead moon. He had expected hunters, Groll assassins or Confederacy Black Ops. Someone. Anyone. The waiting was making the ticker thrum with angry energy. Then, a flicker of movement. Not a dropship screaming in from orbit, but a single figure, trudging through the dust storm. They were too small for a Groll shock trooper, too graceful for a Confederacy Marine in full kit. Rorik zoomed in, the optics in his eye whining softly. The figure wore a long, dark coat, the collar turned up against the wind. They moved with a purpose that felt achingly familiar. His breath hitched. The ticker gave a violent jolt, sending a spike of icy pain through his chest. It couldn't be. The figure reached the cairn and stopped. They stood for a long moment, a silhouette against the swirling gray chaos. Then, slowly, they knelt. The wind tore the hood back, and Rorik's world fractured. Long, silver hair, pinned in a severe but practical bun. The sharp, elegant lines of a Taurian face, etched with a sorrow so profound it seemed to carve new lines into her features. Colonel Tamsin Virgil, Vulture 1. His Tamsin. The wind carried her voice. A whisper snatched and distorted by the static. Yet it cut through the noise and straight into his soul.
"I'm sorry,"
she wept, her voice breaking on the words. She reached down, her gloved fingers tracing the edge of the topmost rock.
"I'm sorry that I couldn't save you."
The lie in her words ignited a cold nausea in his gut. The sound of the wind faded to a dull roar. He had replayed that last day 1,000,000 times in the dark, in the deconstruction chambers, the ambush, the comms blackout, the order from High Command, relayed by her, that split his fire team just before the Groll descended, the order that had sent him and his men into a meat grinder. He was on his feet before he knew it, the rifle forgotten. He drew the plasma pistol from his hip, the weapon feeling like an extension of his own burning fury. He moved silently, the wind masking his approach. He saw the slight tremor in her shoulders, the way she hunched over the rocks as if protecting them from the storm. The sight didn't soften him. It hardened him. It was a performance. It had to be. He stopped directly behind her, the muzzle of his pistol inches from her head. The ticker was a low, guttural growl in his chest now. A caged beast begging for release.
Get up.
The words were gravel, torn from a throat that hadn't known softness in a very long time. Tamsin froze. Every muscle in her body went rigid. It was a ghost's voice, one she only heard in her nightmares, screaming her name. The grief that had been a cold weight in her stomach for months evaporated in a hot, dizzying rush, leaving her lightheaded and breathless. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, she turned her head. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, widened in disbelief, then horror, then confusion, so pure it was almost painful to watch.
Rorik?
She breathed, the name a fragile thing in the brutal wind.
On your feet, Colonel.
He snarled, the rank tasting like acid.
Hands where I can see 'em.
He was a nightmare given form. Thinner, harder, his face a road map of new scars cutting across the old ones. One eye was his, the familiar green flecked with gold, but the other was a cold mechanical lens glowing with a faint blue light. He was alive, and he was pointing a gun at her.
Rorik, what is this? How are you? Shut up,
he snapped.
I knew they'd send someone. I just didn't think that they'd send you. Sold you out?
Her voice cracked, a fissure in her carefully constructed composure.
You were declared KIA. Your whole team. Rorik, the operation was a disaster. We lost everyone. No,
he said, his voice dangerously low.
You lost them. I watched them die. I was the only one they took alive. A special prize.
Before she could process the horrific implication of his words, a new sound cut through the storm's howl. The high-pitched shriek of atmospheric entry. Rorik's head snapped up, his machine eye instantly tracking the source. A dark, angular shape tore through the gray clouds. A dropship of Grohl design. Simultaneously, from the opposite direction, a smaller rust bucket of a smuggler ship hastily lifted off, its engine screaming in panic before it vanished into the storm. Her ride, her last chance off this rock. She was stranded.
Damn it!
He spat, the raw hatred in his voice for Tamsin momentarily eclipsed by tactical necessity. The dropship's belly opened, disgorging a squad of armored figures who hit the ground running. They were mercenaries, clad in matched sets of professional, non-standard black armor. They fanned out from the ramp without a single wasted step, each member covering a specific sector. Rorik didn't hesitate. He grabbed Tamsin's arm, his grip like iron, and shoved her behind the cairn of rocks that had, seconds before, been the symbol of his death.
Stay down!
A volley of crimson energy bolts slammed into the rocks where they had been sitting, vaporizing stone and kicking up superheated dust.
Who are they?
Tamsin yelled over the roar of weapons fire, drawing her own standard-issue sidearm from beneath her coat. The familiar weight of it was a small comfort in a universe that had suddenly tilted on its axis. Rorik risked a glance over their cover, his cybernetic eye tagging targets and analyzing their tactical spread.
They're moving like a Confederacy Spec Ops retrieval squad.
He grunted, firing a blue plasma bolt that struck a charging mercenary squarely in the chest, sending him sprawling.
They're not here to kill you. They're here to take you. Take me? Why?
She shouted, adding her own fire to his. Her shots went wide, the recoil jarring after months of disuse.
Because dead traitors can't be put on trial.
He shot back, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity.
They need their patsy alive to sell the story. And me, ha! I'm just a ghost they weren't expecting. A complication they've come to correct.
That doesn't make any sense, she yelled, centering herself, her grip tightening, her breathing falling into a familiar combat rhythm. Her neck shots were steadier, more accurate.
Nothing about this makes sense,
he roared back. He ducked as another volley turned the rock above their heads into glowing slag.
Except that we're both on the wrong end of a lot of guns. Cover me.
He didn't wait for an answer. He vaulted over the cairn, moving with a jarring, inhuman speed. It was a blur of motion, each shot from his two-handed grip placed exactly where it would cause the most disruption. He orchestrated chaos, his movements illogical, unpredictable. He'd charge forward, draw their fire, then sidestep at the last possible second, letting their own bolts take out the comrades in the crossfire. It was a mad dance that he'd perfected during his escape. Tamsin watched, stunned. This was Rorik, but a version of him honed to a razor's edge and dipped in poison. His fighting style had always been unorthodox. Now, it was feral. She shook off her shock and began providing covering fire, falling back into their old rhythm without a word. A deadly duet of covering fire and aggressive assault. He was the spear tip, she was the shield. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The mercenaries were closing in, their superior firepower pinning them down. He was fast, but he wasn't invincible. A particle beam clipped his shoulder, and he grunted in pain, stumbling. "Rorik!" He ignored her, his eyes fixed on the source of their problems. The sleek, shark-like gunship the mercenaries had arrived in, its ramp still down, engines idling. An idea, born of desperation and sheer bloody-minded insanity, sparked in his mind.
"New plan,"
he grunted, shoving a fresh energy cell into his pistol.
"What new plan?"
Tamsin yelled, reloading her own weapon.
"Our old plan was don't die, and we're failing spectacularly at it." "We're borrowing their ride,"
he said, a wild, dangerous grin spreading across his face. It was the first time she'd seen him smile, and it was terrifying.
"On my mark, you run for that ramp. Don't stop, don't look back, don't do anything but run. You got it?"
"You've written our suicide note."
"It's the best I got. Mark!"
He burst from cover, not toward the ship, but directly at the nearest group of mercenaries. The move was so unexpected, so completely illogical, that they hesitated for a fatal second. That was all Tamsin needed. She broke from cover and sprinted for the gunship, her legs burning, the thunder of weapons fire at her back. Rorik crashed into the mercenaries, a whirlwind of fists and fury. He fought like a pure weapon, all trace of the soldier gone. The ticker in his chest flared with a pulse of blue light visible through his jacket, and a wave of kinetic energy seemed to ripple from him, staggering the men closest to him. He used the moment of confusion to carve a path of destruction. Tamsin reached the ramp, stumbling as a shot scorched the ground by her feet. She risked a glance back. Rorik was holding them off, a lone figure against a dozen, but he was taking hits. His coat was smoking in several places.
"Get in!"
he bellowed, his voice raw with strain. She scrambled up the ramp and into the ship's cargo bay. It was dark, smelling of discharged capacitors and recycled air. Alien glyphs glowed on the walls. She turned, expecting him to be right behind her. He was still out there, fighting, buying her time.
"Rorik, get in here!"
He kicked the last conscious mercenary into another, then turned and sprinted for the ramp, firing blindly behind him. He launched himself into the ship just as a particle beam sheared through the metal where his head had been. He slammed his hand against a large, glowing panel on the wall. The ramp hissed shut, sealing them in darkness, punctuated by the thud of enemy fire against the hull. Rorik staggered past her, heading for the cockpit.
"Get strapped in."
He coughed, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. Tamsin followed him, her mind reeling. The cockpit was a cramped space designed for a single pilot, dominated by a holographic display showing a dizzying array of Groll symbols. Rorik slumped into the pilot seat and began hitting controls with a familiarity that chilled her. "You know how to fly this thing?" she asked, wedging herself into the small space behind him.
"Learned on the fly during my escape,"
he grunted, his fingers tracing glowing glyphs and slapping crystalline panels.
"Mostly by hitting things until something happened."
The ship's engines roared to life, the vibrations shaking the deck plates.
"Turns out, get the hell out of here is a pretty universal design principle."
With a lurch that threw Tamsin against the bulkhead, the gunship, the Razor's Edge, blasted off the moon's surface, leaving a cloud of dust and a dozen very angry, very stranded mercenaries in its wake. The silence in the cockpit was heavier than any gravity. Outside the viewport, the gray marble of Erebus dwindled, replaced by the infinite, star-dusted black. The adrenaline of the firefight and the escape faded, leaving a raw, aching emptiness in its place. Rorik's hands were still clenched on the controls, his knuckles white. Tamsin stood behind him, her arms wrapped around herself, the questions she wanted to ask warring with the fear of their answers. He broke the silence, his voice a low, venomous snarl. He didn't even turn to look at her.
"You left me to die."
He stated it as a fact, a verdict delivered after months of solitary deliberation.
"No,"
Tamsin said, her own voice shaking with a mix of anger and relief.
"Rorik, that's not what happened. You were declared killed in action. The entire operation was compromised. High Command issued a full retreat order." "Your order,"
he corrected, finally turning his head. His mismatched eyes burned into her. The organic one was filled with pain, the mechanical one cold, analytical fury.
"The order that sent my squad into the kill box while the rest of the fleet pulled back. You fed us to them, Tamsin."
It was an encrypted command from Admiral Corvus himself, authenticated and routed through my station,"
she shot back, stepping closer. The cockpit was so small they were almost touching.
"I questioned it. I demanded confirmation, and I was told to follow my orders or face a court-martial. By the time we realized what was happening, your comms went dark. We thought you were all gone."
"Convenient,"
he spat, the word dripping with contempt.
"Everyone dead, no witnesses, and the Colonel gets to play the grieving hero."
"Do you think this was easy?"
Her voice rose, the carefully controlled dam of her emotions finally cracking.
"I paid a smuggler with the last of my savings to bring me to this forgotten piece of rock, just for a moment of peace, just to say goodbye, because I have spent every single day for the last 6 months blaming myself for your death."
"Because you should!"
he roared, slamming his fist against the console. The ship's lights flickered.
"Because I wasn't dead. They took me, the Groll. They have this process. They call it deconstruction."
He ripped his jacket open with a single, violent motion. Tamsin gasped. His chest was a horrifying tapestry of scar tissue and technology. A web of black metallic struts and silvery wires was fused into his skin, all of it converging onto a central device embedded where his sternum should be. It pulsed with a sickly blue light, the rhythm unsteady, chaotic, and looked like a mechanical spider had burrowed into his heart.
"This,"
Rorik said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper,
"is the ticker, a singularity core. My own personal moody little black hole. It powers their upgrades."
He gestured to his cybernetic eye.
"They tortured me, rebuilt me. I was their first human subject, their guinea pig. They wanted the perfect weapon,
Their mistake was understanding how human trauma interacts with their tech. They put me in a simulation, a final test. Now the target was a model of you. The emotional conflict created a feedback loop they couldn't have predicted, broke their programming.
He tapped the ticker.
And it gave me control of this. It's unstable. A weapon with a cost for every use. I can vent a directed plasma burst, but it's like opening a furnace door. It burns me from the inside out, and I'll be useless for an hour. I can release a kinetic pulse, a blunt instrument that rattles my own bones and drains the core stability, and if it ever goes critical...
He gave a short, mirthless laugh.
We all go boom. A city-leveling, very personal supernova. So you see, Colonel, your timing was impeccable.
Tamsin stared, horrified and speechless. The man she loved had been through a hell she couldn't even comprehend. She stumbled to the ship's auxiliary console, her fingers moving swiftly, bypassing the girl's security safeguards. She pulled up a public access channel for the Terran Confederacy network, and after a few seconds of frantic searching, brought up a file. Spinning the holographic display toward him, it was a wanted poster. Her face, stern and official, stared out from it.
Colonel Tamsin Virgil.
Rorik read aloud, his voice losing its sharp edge, replaced by a dull confusion.
Wanted for treason, sedition, conspiracy with a hostile power. Accused of leaking classified intelligence to the Grohl Hive. Resulted in the massacre of Fireteam Vulture.
He looked from the poster to her face, the gears of paranoia grinding against the undeniable evidence in front of him.
They framed you.
They framed us.
She corrected, her voice gaining strength.
Don't you see? Someone wanted your unit gone, and they needed a scapegoat to cover their tracks. You were the sacrifice. I was the patsy.
The fury drained out of Rorik, leaving behind a chilling emptiness. This was more than a simple betrayal. He was a loose end in a conspiracy that had devoured his men, turned him into a monster, and ruined the life of the only person he had ever truly loved. He sank back into the pilot seat, the blue light of the ticker in his chest pulsing a slow, mournful rhythm. They weren't enemies. They were survivors, and they were being hunted by both sides of the war.
Approaching orbital station designated the Gut.
A voice announced from the ship's speakers. It was synthesized, a deeply melancholic baritone, like a funeral director announcing last call.
A wretched hive of scum and villainy. Scans indicate a 73.4% probability of being stabbed, a 48.2% probability of being cheated, and a 100% probability of smelling something unpleasant. I recommend we turn around and embrace the sweet, silent oblivion of deep space. It would be a far more dignified end. Noted, Marvin.
Rorik muttered, guiding the stolen gunship toward the massive, jury-rigged space station. The Gut was less a station and more a cancerous amalgamation of decommissioned freighters, hollowed-out asteroids, and stolen military modules, all welded together in a chaotic tangle of greed and desperation. It was the last place anyone with a functioning moral compass would go, which made it perfect. "You named the ship's AI Marvin?" Tamsin asked, raising an eyebrow. She was tending to the gash on his shoulder, her touch gentle, each motion cleaning and dressing the wound without waste.
He's a Grohl model. I value logic over all else. I figured a name from an old Earth book about a clinically depressed robot was fitting.
Rorik said.
It's much more fun this way.
Your definition of fun continues to astound me, she said, her voice dry. They landed the Razor's Edge in a darkened docking bay that cost them nearly all of their remaining credits. The humid air was so thick it was an effort to breathe in it. A cocktail of unidentifiable fried foods, stale booze, and machine oil. Rorik was on edge, his hands never straying far from the plasma pistol hidden under his long coat. Every sideways glance felt like a threat. The ticker in his chest was a low hum of anxiety. They found their way to a bar called the Gilded Slug, a place so grimy the name had to be ironic. In a corner booth, hunched over a flickering data slate, was their target. Glix, the Jordan information broker. According to the chatter on Tamsin's wanted poster, Glix was the one who sold her location on Erebus. Rorik slid into the booth opposite him, while Tamsin stood guard.
We need to know who you paid for the location of Colonel Tamsin Vigil,
Rorik said, his voice low and direct.
and who you paid to falsify the intelligence that put her on that list in the first place.
Glix's eyes, clusters of dark lenses, flickered up. A nervous sweat broke out on his tough, ridged brow.
Look, man, I just moved data. It was a blind contract, triple encrypted. It paid out from a shell corporation. It was untraceable.
Untrace it, Tamsin said, her voice cold and demanding. She slid a credit chip across the table. That should cover your expenses, and your silence. Glix snatched the chip. His slender fingers tapped and swiped across the data slate surface. The seconds stretched on.
Okay, he stammered. The Shell Corporation. It's a Black Ops slush fund, military. Terran Confederacy, it's, Admiral level.
He looked up, his eyes wide with fear.
The account is flagged with the internal designation for Admiral Corvus Varus.
Tamsin flinched as if struck. Varus, her mentor. Before she could speak, the entire front row of the Gilded Slug exploded inward in a shower of glass and metal. Patrons screamed and dove for cover. A figure in sleek black armor landed in a crouch in the middle of the room, particle rifle already raised. The Grohl Hunter.
Marvin was right,
Rorik snarled, shoving the table up for cover.
We should have embraced oblivion.
The hunter was a pure predator, and she had tracked her prey. The unique energy signature of the Razor's Edge had been a beacon leading her straight to them. Her first shot wasn't aimed at Rorik or Tamsin. A pencil-thin beam of red light lanced across the room and vaporized Glix's head. The data slate clattered to the floor, smoking, loose end tied. The bar erupted into pure chaos. The hunter was relentless. She moved with a silent, deadly grace, ignoring the fleeing patrons, her helmeted gaze fixed solely on Rorik. The fight spilled out of the bar and into the main concourse of the gut, a chaotic battleground of panicked civilians and overturned market stalls. Station security alarms blared.
This is personal,
Rorik grunted, ducking behind a large cargo container as a volley of shots stitched a pattern across the metal.
They built her for my combat data, my psych profile. They sent her to clean up their mess.
Well then stop being predictable, Tamsin yelled, laying down covering fire from a different angle, trying to draw the hunter's attention. The hunter anticipated their every move, her fire accurate and overwhelming. She pinned Rorik down, then, seeing an opening, shifted her aim. A single shot caught Tamsin squarely in the leg. Tamsin cried out, collapsing to the ground, her hand immediately going to the bleeding, cauterized wound. Something inside Rorik snapped. The low thrum of the ticker in his chest roared to life. The grief, the betrayal, the paranoia, it all coalesced into a single, incandescent point of pure rage. The air around him crackled. A faint blue aura wavered into existence.
You want to see what they taught me?
He roared, his voice distorted, echoing with power. He stood up, Abandoning his cover completely, the hunter fired, a killing shot aimed straight at his heart. Rorik didn't dodge. He deliberately vented. With an agonizing scream, he pushed a controlled burst of raw energy from the Singularity core. It was a wave of coruscating blue plasma that erupted from his chest, swallowing the hunter's particle beam. The shockwave sent loose debris flying and cracked the deck plates around him. The hunter was thrown back, her rifle knocked from her hands. Rorik moved, a blur of blue light and fury. The fight was short and brutal. He drove his fist, glowing with the ticker's light, into the hunter's chest plate. There was a sickening crunch of metal and wiring. The hunter crumpled to the ground, inert. The blue aura around Rorik vanished. The cost of the power surge hit him. The ticker glowed an angry, alarming red through his coat. A wave of nausea and pain washed over him, and he collapsed to his knees. He looked at Tamsin, who was struggling to get up, her face pale.
Come on, Vulture One,
he rasped, crawling to her and hooking an arm under hers. Leaning on each other, they limped back toward the docking bay, leaving the chaos and the dead hunter behind them. Warning, Singularity core temperature is approaching critical levels. Marvin's deadpan voice announced. Containment field integrity at 12%. I calculate a 97% probability of imminent catastrophic detonation. On the bright side, our shared experience will conclude in a truly spectacular fashion.
Shut up, Marvin,
Tamsin grunted, her brow slick with sweat. They were hidden in a dense asteroid field. The only light in the cockpit of the Razor's Edge came from the terrifying, pulsing red glow from Rorik's chest. It was unconscious on the deck. Tamsin was frantically working on him, using the ship's medical kit and a jury-rigged interface. Slowly, the angry red light began to recede, replaced by a less alarming orange.
Core temperature stabilizing,
Marvin intoned. Probability of becoming a small, short-lived star has been reduced to a statistically acceptable 3%. You have merely postponed the inevitable. Tamsin slumped back, exhausted. She looked at Rorik. In the dim light, he almost looked like a man she remembered. She gently brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead.
I never thought I'd see you again,
she whispered. His organic eye fluttered open.
Vulture One,
he whispered, the old call sign raw and stripped of all its armor.
I'm here, Rorik,
she said.
Most of me is still back there,
he breathed.
in that place.
Not all of you, she said fiercely. They didn't win. He looked at her, truly looked at her. The anger was gone, replaced by the ghost of what they had been, a fragile ember in the dark. Once Rorik was stable, Tamsin turned her attention to Glix's data slate. Most of it was fried, but the shielded core memory unit was intact. She plugged it into the ship's computer, ignoring Marvin's complaints about unhygienic hardware. Hours later, she found it. Project Chimera. A proposal. The full battle plans for Fireteam Vulture, in exchange for the Grohl's deconstruction technology. Varus hadn't stumbled into a disaster. He had engineered it. He had traded Rorik's men for hardware and framed Tamsin to cover his tracks.
That son of a bitch,
Rorik whispered, his voice shaking with a cold, pure hatred.
We have to stop him. We can't just leak this. He'll bury it. We need a confession.
And how do we get a confession from the most powerful man in the Fifth Fleet? Rorik looked at her. A slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. He brought up a news feed on the main screen. Admiral Varus was to deliver the keynote address at the Confederacy Unit Gala aboard the orbital station Apex.
"We crashed the party,"
he said. Tamsin stared at the screen, then at Rorik. She saw the insane, brilliant, utterly suicidal idea forming in his mind.
"No."
"Yes," he countered. "We use a stolen maintenance shuttle, EVA across the hull, and we blow our way through a service airlock. They'll be expecting an attack from a fleet. They're not going to be expecting two pissed-off ghosts coming through the plumbing." That was insane. It was illogical. It was quintessentially human. It was, Tamsin had to admit, a beautifully terrible idea. Marvin has a name for plans like this. Oh? Statistically insignificant chances of success leading to a high probability of spectacular failure.
Oh, I love it when he talks dirty.
Rorik grinned.
"Let's go crash a party."
"A warning before you disembark." Marvin's voice chimed in their helmets as they prepared to leave the stolen maintenance shuttle. "You are about to perform a extravehicular activity on the hull of a rotating body. Due to the Coriolis effect, every step forward will feel like you are being pushed sideways. Your inner ears will violently disagree with what your eyes are seeing. The statistical probability of projectile vomiting inside your own helmet is a non-trivial 38%. Do try to aim away from your visor. Good luck."
"Thanks for the pep talk, Marvin,"
Rorik muttered. They stepped out into the star-dusted blackness. The EVA was as disorienting as the AI had predicted. It was a nauseating crawl across the station's massive, spinning hull. Finally, they reached service airlock Gamma 9. Rorik planted a shaped charge. With a silent flash, the outer door peeled open. They slipped inside, and the moment the inner door hissed open, the alarm started blaring. The gilded halls of Apex Station were a chaotic battleground. Varus's personal guard, equipped with the very Chimera tech Rorik's team had died for, swarmed them. Tamsin, despite her leg, provided tactical callouts while Rorik became a human wrecking ball. The blue light of his ticker flaring as he unleashed controlled kinetic pulses to stagger his foes. He fought with a desperate energy, knowing his reserves were limited. They burst through the massive doors of the grand ballroom. Panic erupted. On the stage, Admiral Corvus Varus remained perfectly calm, a sneer on his subtly enhanced face.
"Lieutenant Mason,"
Varus said, his voice amplified by the sound system.
"I must confess I am surprised. Your sacrifice gave us the edge we needed to win this war. A fair trade for one fire team. Wouldn't you agree?"
He was confessing, arrogant and untouchable.
"You're a traitor,"
Tamsin said, her fingers moving across her data slate, slicing through security lockouts. The broadcast feed was almost hers. Varus lunged, moving with augmented speed. He and Rorik engaged in a vicious final battle. Rorik's wild, chaotic style against Varus's controlled, overwhelming power. Rorik was outmatched. Varus was stronger, faster, the finished product of a technology Rorik had only been a prototype for. A devastating blow to Rorik's chest sent him reeling, the ticker flickering violently.
"Got it!"
Tamsin yelled. The live feed was hers. Varus's confession was being beamed to every screen in the system. Rorik saw it. He knew it was enough. I looked at Tamsin, a silent apology in his eyes.
"Rorik, no!"
she screamed. He grinned, a bloody, defiant grin, and looked up at Varus. The ticker began to glow a blinding, pure white.
"You wanted human chaos? Eat this!"
He pushed the core to the brink of meltdown and unleashed a massive, semi-contained supernova of electromagnetic and kinetic energy. The wave fried every piece of technology on the stage, including Varus's enhancements, and sent the Admiral flying to land in a broken, sparking heap. Rorik collapsed, the ticker sputtering into darkness. Confederacy security forces swarmed the ruined ballroom, taking the stunned Varus into custody. Sometime later, a high-ranking officer with a weary face approached Tamsin, General Oris, an old friend. He didn't come as a representative. He came as a conspirator.
Tamsin,
He said, his voice a low whisper.
the broadcast worked. Varus is in custody, but this thing's a political firestorm. Council's burying it deep. The official story is that Varus was a lone traitor and Lieutenant Mason died a hero stopping him. That's the only narrative that holds the fleet together.
Rorik, leaning against a pillar, let out a weak, sarcastic laugh.
So I'm dead again. I'm getting good at it.
Oris looked at Rorik, a mixture of awe and terror in his eyes.
They can't acknowledge you. A living super soldier with enemy tech. The lab coats, they want to dissect you. And the politicians, they want to bury you for real. I can't give you pardon. The Confederacy will never forgive your existence.
He glanced around, ensuring no one was listening.
But I can give you a 30-minute head start. A scrub transponder code for your ship, an unmarked jump point, and you get it. Disappear, Tamsin. Both of you, and never, ever come back.
This was an escape, the only real freedom they were ever going to get. Tamsin looked at the life she was leaving behind, then at the broken man she refused to abandon. "Thank you, General," she said. She hauled Rorik back to the razor's edge. In the cockpit, as she stabilized the ticker with the ship's power, he woke. He looked around the cockpit, at the endless sea of stars. And then at her. The weariness was still there, but the paranoia was gone, replaced by a quiet acceptance.
So, where to next, Colonel?
He asked. Tamsin finished inputting the coordinates to an unknown region, a blank spot on the map. She turned to him and smiled. A real smile, bright and full of the future that they hadn't dared to imagine. "Just fly, you idiot," she said. The razor's edge stretched the fabric of reality, and with a flash of brilliant light, it jumped, leaving the chaos behind for a future they would make for themselves. The disorienting kaleidoscope of jump space resolved into a sea of unfamiliar constellations, bathing the cockpit in the soft light of a nebula the color of spilled wine. The silence stretched, comfortable and profound. Rorik began, his voice quiet.
I'm guessing that I don't have to salute you anymore, Colonel.
Tamsin turned her head, a genuine, unguarded smile gracing her lips. "I think that you've earned the right to call me Tamsin," she said softly. She squeezed his hand. "But you're still on navigation duty. Find us a place to lie low for a while." He grinned, that wild, dangerous smile she was beginning to love.
Excellent. I was getting pretty good at hitting random things until they worked.
He paused, his smile softening as he met her gaze.
And for the record, my suicide note was much better than yours.
"My suicide note got the most powerful man in the fleet arrested," she countered, raising an eyebrow. "Yours involved blowing up the ballroom. We are not the same."
"It's true," he conceded. "Mine had more style."
She laughed, a real unburdened sound that felt more precious than any metal. Her expression grew serious then, her eyes dropping to the faint blue glow beneath his jacket. "Just try not to make that your go-to problem-solving technique from now on. It is a direct order." The playfulness in his eyes faded, replaced by a raw sincerity that made her breath catch.
"I wasn't planning on it,"
he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper.
Not anymore. Turns out, I finally found something worth sticking around for.
Tamsin leaned in, her forehead resting against his for a brief, perfect moment. The universe outside could wait. Pulling back, she looked out at the endless starfield, her mind already shifting from survivor to strategist. "You know," she said, a new purpose dawning in her voice, "there are a lot of forgotten corners in the galaxy. Worlds the Confederacy wrote off. People they abandoned long before they abandoned us." Rorik followed her gaze, the idea taking root in his own defiant heart. They weren't just running away. They were running to something.
Sounds like they could use a couple of pissed-off ghosts on their side,
he said, a slow, determined grin spreading across his face. He looked at her, his mismatched eyes shining with a light she hadn't seen since before the war. The light of a man who had found his mission.
"Let's go raise some hell, Vulture One."
His hand found hers, lacing their fingers together over the ship's controls. The cold metal of the console was a stark contrast to the warmth of her skin. The blue light from the ticker in his chest no longer looked like a wound, but a hearth fire, its steady pulse a testament to the stubborn, unbreakable thing they had both almost lost. They weren't just a soldier and a commander anymore, not a ghost and a traitor. They were humanity's untamed heart, cast out into the dark. Two souls who had walked through hell to find each other on the other side, armed with a stolen ship, a tamed black hole, and the kind of chaotic, illogical, beautiful hope that could remake a galaxy.